The Draconian Empire stretched across 300 star systems like a giant web of power and fear. At its center sat Emperor Valthor, a massive dragon whose black scales gleamed like polished stone under artificial lights. He had ruled for over 4 centuries, watching empires rise and fall, species come and go. His palace floated above the capital world, a crystal fortress where alien nobility plotted and schemed for favor. But today the ancient emperor faced a problem even his power couldn't solve easily. His latest consort had died 3 months ago, and the noble houses were circling like hungry predators. In Draconian culture, an unmarried emperor was considered weak, vulnerable. The Grand Chancellor, a cunning politician named Theron, saw his opportunity. Down in the servant quarters, deep beneath the glittering halls where nobles danced, a young woman named Maya Rodriguez scrubbed floors. Her hands were rough from 2 years of endless work. Her back ached from carrying water, cleaning chambers, and staying invisible. Being invisible was the key to survival when you were human in an alien empire. Maya had been captured during a raid on her frontier colony. She remembered the screams, the fire, the moment Draconian warships descended from the sky. One moment she was studying agricultural engineering at the colony university. The next, she was in chains, shipped across the galaxy to serve creatures who barely acknowledged her existence. She'd learned the palace rhythms. Wake before dawn, work until midnight, speak only when spoken to. The Draconians treated humans like talking furniture, useful but unimportant. Maya had watched other human slaves break under the weight of invisibility. Some went mad. Others simply gave up and died. But Maya survived by watching, learning, understanding. She picked up the Draconian language by listening. She memorized the layout of the palace by observing guard rotations. She knew which nobles were kind and which were cruel. Knowledge was the only weapon a slave could carry. That morning started like any other. Maya was scrubbing the marble floors of the western corridor when palace guards surrounded her. Their armor gleamed, their weapons hummed with energy. She froze, heart hammering. Had she done something wrong? Had someone reported her for listening to conversations she shouldn't hear? The guard captain, a younger Draconian with blue-tinted scales, looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and spoke in broken English, which surprised Maya because most Draconians never bothered learning human languages. You come now. Grand Chancellor orders. Terror flooded through her. The Grand Chancellor only dealt with high-level matters. Slaves who were summoned to Theron rarely came back. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Execution? Reassignment to the mining colonies where life expectancy was measured in months? Worse. The guards marched her through corridors she'd only cleaned at night when nobles were sleeping. Other servants pressed against walls, avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to be associated with someone being led away by armed guards. They brought her to the Hall of Ceremonies, a vast chamber with ceilings so high they disappeared into artificial clouds. Thousands of alien nobles filled the space, their scales glittering in rainbow colors. Some had wings, others had multiple heads, a few floated without visible means of support. The Draconian Empire ruled many species, but all bowed before their dragon emperor. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single massive crystal, sat Emperor Valthor. Even from a distance, Maya could feel the weight of his presence. He was enormous, easily 20 feet tall when seated. His scales were the deep black of space itself, and his eyes glowed like molten gold. Beside him stood Grand Chancellor Theron, whispering something that made several nearby nobles laugh. The sound sent chills down Maya's spine. The guard captain pushed her forward. Maya stumbled, catching herself before falling. The crowd's laughter grew louder. She forced herself to walk steadily, chin up, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. When she reached the base of the throne platform, Theron stepped forward. His voice boomed through the hall, amplified by technology Maya didn't understand. As Grand Chancellor, I have found a solution to the succession crisis. To strengthen bonds between the Empire and its conquered territories, Emperor Valthor shall marry this human servant. The ceremony begins immediately. The words didn't make sense at first. Maya's brain refused to process them. Marry? The Emperor? Then understanding crashed over her like ice water. This wasn't an honor. It was a humiliation designed to weaken Valthor politically. Forcing the ancient dragon emperor to marry a human slave was the ultimate insult in Draconian culture. Theron was making a public mockery of the throne. The nobles erupted in whispers and sneers. Some looked delighted at the scandal. Others appeared horrified at the breach of tradition. A few watched with calculating eyes, already planning how to exploit this weakness. Maya looked up at Emperor Valthor, expecting to see rage or disgust. Instead, his golden eyes studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Not anger. Not contempt. Something else entirely. Something that looked almost like recognition. The wedding ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. Ancient words in a language Maya didn't understand, spoken by a priest whose face was hidden behind ceremonial masks. She stood in her servant's clothing, still dirty from scrubbing floors that morning, while the entire court watched in barely concealed amusement. When the priest declared them bound, the hall filled with polite applause that sounded more like mockery than celebration. Maya expected to be thrown back into the servant quarters, this whole thing just a cruel joke. Instead, the guards escorted her to the imperial wing, to chambers so vast her entire colony home could have fit inside the bedroom alone. Then they left her there, alone with Emperor Valthor. The massive dragon moved to the windows overlooking the capital city below. For a long moment he said nothing. Maya stood near the door, calculating if she could run, knowing it was pointless. Finally he spoke in perfect, unaccented English that shocked her to her core. Your grandmother's name was Rebecca Rodriguez. She lived in Colorado in a small town called Durango. She had a barn painted red, 3 horses, and a dog named Chester who barked at everything. Maya's legs nearly gave out. Her grandmother had died when Maya was 12, but she remembered the stories. The red barn. The horses. Chester the paranoid dog. Stories her grandmother told about finding an injured traveler once, nursing him back to health in secret. 60 years ago my ship crashed in her pasture, Valthor continued, still facing the window. I was dying. My people were weeks away. She found me terrified but curious. She could have reported me to your military, collected a reward. Instead she brought me food, water, bandages. She sat with me for hours talking about Earth, humanity, philosophy, terrible television shows. He turned to face Maya, and his ancient eyes held genuine emotion. She wore that necklace. The one you're wearing now. I gave it to her before I left, a quantum beacon disguised as jewelry so I could always find her if she needed me. I wanted to come back. To take her away from that small planet, show her the universe. But I returned to an empire that would never accept a human empress. I had duties, obligations, a throne that demanded everything. Maya touched the silver necklace at her throat, the one possession she'd managed to keep through her capture and enslavement. Her grandmother said it was a gift from an old friend. Maya had thought it was just a story, the romantic imagination of a lonely woman. Why are you telling me this? Maya asked, finding her voice. Because Grand Chancellor Theron thinks he's humiliated me by forcing this marriage. He believes binding me to a human slave will make the noble houses question my strength, create divisions in the court. He's planning to use this embarrassment to strip away my authority, possibly even arrange my death during the Festival of Flames next month. Valthor moved closer, his massive form somehow less intimidating now. But Theron made a critical mistake. He didn't research which human he was choosing. He grabbed a random servant, thinking all humans were interchangeable. He doesn't know you're Rebecca's granddaughter. He doesn't know I've been waiting 60 years for a chance to change this empire, and he just handed me the perfect catalyst. Maya's mind spun. I don't understand. What do you want from me? Your grandmother taught me something the rest of my species forgot centuries ago. She showed me that progress comes from challenging traditions, from seeing problems from new angles, from refusing to accept that things must remain as they've always been. Humans are dangerous because you adapt, innovate, refuse limitations. He paused. I need that perspective. I need someone the nobles will underestimate while we dismantle their corrupt system from within. You want me to spy for you? I want you to be yourself. Walk through the palace. Listen to conversations. Apply human logic to draconian problems. In 1 year, I'll grant you freedom, wealth, passage to any human world you choose. But if we succeed, you'll have helped transform an empire. Maya studied the ancient emperor, seeing past the scales and size to the being who'd loved her grandmother, who'd carried that love for 60 years across the stars. This could be a trap, another layer of cruelty. Or it could be real. What happens if we fail? She asked. Theron executes us both, probably during the festival as public entertainment. He's already bribing arena masters and positioning assassins. Those are terrible odds. Yes. Your grandmother would have done it anyway. Maya laughed despite everything because he was right. Rebecca Rodriguez had never backed down from a challenge, never accepted the word impossible. She'd raised Maya on stories of fighting for what mattered, even when the odds were stacked against you. One condition, Maya said. You stop calling me your wife or your consort. We're partners in this or I walk away right now. For the first time, Valthor's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. Agreed. Partner. Over the following weeks, Maya discovered she had a talent for palace intrigue. Being underestimated was a weapon sharper than any blade. Nobles ignored her completely, continuing conversations as if she were furniture. She served wine during strategy meetings and heard military secrets. She cleaned private chambers and found encoded messages between conspirators. She learned that Theron wasn't just planning assassination, he was systematically embezzling imperial resources, funneling wealth to his own family while outer colonies starved. She discovered which noble houses were loyal, which were opportunistic, and which would support change if given the chance. But Maya didn't just spy. She started applying human solutions to problems the Draconians had struggled with for decades. When plague broke out on the agricultural moon of Tharsis IV, threatening food supplies for 3 systems, Maya suggested quarantine protocols and contact tracing. Draconian medicine had no concept of disease vectors or controlled isolation. Within 2 weeks, the plague was contained with minimal casualties. When trade negotiations stalled with the insectoid hive queens of the VRNN collective, Maya broke every diplomatic protocol by suggesting they share a meal together. Draconians saw eating as private, almost shameful. But humans understood breaking bread built trust. The hive queens, who valued hospitality above formal treaties, were delighted. Trade routes opened that had been closed for 30 years. Each success made Maya more valuable to the Empire. And each success made her more dangerous to those who profited from the status quo. Grand Chancellor Theron watched this human slave gaining influence, earning respect from military commanders and common workers alike, and accelerated his plans. The Festival of Flames was 3 weeks away. Maya and Valthor had to survive it. But more than that, they had to win it because Theron wasn't just planning murder anymore. He was planning a complete takeover, and he'd made sure every piece was in position. Maya had gone from scrubbing floors to playing the most dangerous game in the Empire. Her grandmother would have been proud. The Festival of Flames came with fanfare that shook the palace foundations. For 3 days, the Empire celebrated with tournaments, feasts, and political theater that determined the hierarchy of noble houses for the coming year. It was spectacle and blood sport combined, where alliances were forged and enemies were destroyed, all under the guise of tradition and honor. Maya spent those 3 weeks preparing, but not in ways the court expected. While Valthor met with military advisors and reviewed security protocols, Maya did something far more subversive. She talked to people nobody else noticed. She sat in the kitchen with the cooking staff, learning which servants had worked in the palace for decades, who had families in the lower cities, who struggled to feed their children on imperial wages. She walked through the maintenance tunnels with technicians who kept the floating palace operational, listening to their complaints about outdated equipment and ignored safety concerns. She visited the guard barracks and played cards with off-duty soldiers who were tired of dying in pointless territorial wars. These were the people who made the Empire function, and the nobles treated them like they were invisible. Maya knew exactly how that felt. She also knew these overlooked workers held more real power than any noble house, if someone just bothered to ask for their help. Her most important ally was a guard captain named Kyle Mitchell, one of the few other humans in the palace military. He'd been conscripted 15 years ago, worked his way up through pure competence, and commanded a unit of mixed-species soldiers fiercely loyal to him. Kyle was skeptical when Maya first approached him. "Why would the Emperor's wife need help from a grunt like me?" he asked, dealing cards in the barracks common room. "Because Theron's planning to kill Valthor during the festival, and I need people who actually care whether this empire burns down or not," Maya said bluntly. Kyle's hand froze mid-deal. Around them, other soldiers went quiet. "That's treason talk. Only if you report me. But you won't because you've served on the front lines. You've seen how Theron's corruption leads to supply shortages, faulty equipment, soldiers dying because some noble pocketed the budget for proper armor." Maya met his eyes steadily. "I'm not asking you to commit treason. I'm asking you to stop it." Kyle studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "What do you need?" By the 3rd day of the festival, Maya had built a network that stretched through every level of the palace. Cooks who could watch for poison. Technicians who controlled environmental systems and surveillance. Guards positioned at key checkpoints. All of them waiting for her signal. The main event was held in the Grand Arena, a massive amphitheater that could hold 50,000 spectators. The Emperor was required to participate in the Trials of Worthiness, ancient competitions that tested strength, strategy, and leadership. Theron had spent months bribing arena masters, arranging equipment failures, and positioning his assassins perfectly. Maya and Valthor arrived together, and the crowd's reaction was mixed. Some nobles still sneered at the human empress walking beside their dragon emperor. But others had noticed the changes happening across the empire, the improvements in efficiency and morale, and they watched with calculating interest. The first trial was single combat. Valthor would face 3 champion fighters selected by the noble houses. As the ancient emperor entered the arena, Maya saw the trap immediately. The weapons provided were treated with a slow-acting poison, invisible to standard scans. Valthor would win the fights but die hours later from organ failure. Maya grabbed Kyle's arm. The weapons? We need to switch them now. We can't stop the trial once it's started. It's against every tradition. Then we don't stop it. We cause a distraction. Maya pulled out a communication device Kyle had given her, connected to the technician network. She spoke quickly in code they'd established. 30 seconds later, the arena's environmental controls went haywire. Lights flickered. Temperature dropped 20 degrees. The holographic display showing betting odds went chaotic. In the confusion, Kyle's guards rushed forward under the pretense of security concerns, swapping the poison weapons for clean ones. The crowd was too distracted to notice. Theron, watching from the noble box, frowned but couldn't prove anything. Valthor fought brilliantly, his centuries of experience showing in every movement. He defeated all 3 champions and the crowd roared approval. But Maya knew the real test was still coming. As Valthor returned from the arena floor, breathing heavily but alive, Theron stood and raised his hand for silence. His voice carried across the stadium through amplification technology. A magnificent display, Your Majesty. But the trials are not complete. As is my right as Grand Chancellor, I invoke the ancient challenge of truth. I accuse the Emperor of compromising imperial security by allowing alien influence to corrupt draconian traditions. The crowd gasped. The challenge of truth was rarely invoked because it meant trial by fire, a test so dangerous that most who attempted it didn't survive. Theron was forcing Valthor into an impossible situation. Refuse and look weak. Accept and probably die. Maya felt her heart hammering. This was the moment they'd prepared for, but seeing it happen in real time was terrifying. Valthor started to speak, but Maya stepped forward first, her voice clear despite her fear. I invoke my right as imperial consort. I will stand trial in the Emperor's place. The arena exploded in shocked noise. Nobles shouted objections. Commoners in the cheap seats craned to see better. Theron's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. This wasn't in his plan. He laughed. A human cannot survive trial by fire. The flames alone will kill you in seconds. Then you should have nothing to worry about, Maya shot back. Unless you're afraid I'll prove you wrong. Valthor gripped her arm, his voice low and urgent. Maya, you don't have to do this. I can handle the trial. No, you can't. He's poisoned the ceremonial fires. I had the technicians test them yesterday. You'd be dead before the first challenge ended. She smiled grimly. Besides, you taught me that humans don't accept the word impossible. Time to prove it. The ancient laws were clear. If a consort invoked trial rights, the challenge had to be accepted. Theron couldn't refuse without looking cowardly. He gestured magnanimously, confident this would end with Maya's death. Very well. Let the human face trial by fire. 3 challenges await. Strategy, wisdom, and heart. Succeed in all 3 and your accusations against me will be heard. Fail and you burn. Maya walked to the center of the arena, very aware that 50,000 beings were watching her. Some wanted her to fail. Others were curious. A few, the servants and soldiers she'd befriended, were silently rooting for her survival. The first challenge materialized in holographic displays around her. Strategy. She had to command a simulated fleet battle against an AI opponent that had never been defeated. The scenario was designed for draconian military thinking, centuries of established tactics and hierarchical command structures. Maya studied the board for 30 seconds, then started giving orders that made the military commanders in the audience sit forward in confusion. She split her fleet into small, independent units. She used false retreats to draw enemies into traps. She targeted supply lines instead of capital ships. She exploited psychological weaknesses in the AI's programming, making it commit forces to defend positions she never intended to attack. It was guerrilla warfare, asymmetric thinking, the kind of tactics humans had perfected fighting against stronger opponents throughout their history. Within 20 minutes, she'd won a battle that was supposed to be unwinnable. The crowd's stunned silence was more satisfying than any applause could have been. The holographic battlefield dissolved, leaving Maya standing in the center of the arena, breathing hard but still standing. The crowd murmured in astonishment. No one had ever defeated that simulation in under an hour, let alone 20 minutes. Military commanders in the noble boxes leaned forward, whispering urgently to each other. Even Theron looked unsettled, though he quickly masked it with a dismissive gesture. "Luck," he announced loudly. The human stumbled into a solution through random chaos. "Let us see how she handles the second challenge." The arena floor shifted, ancient mechanisms grinding as stone pillars rose from beneath. Carved into each pillar were symbols Maya couldn't read, fragments of draconian philosophy accumulated over thousands of years. This was the trial of wisdom, and it had broken the minds of scholars who'd spent lifetimes studying these texts. A holographic display appeared before Maya, showing the famous paradox of thrones. The text scrolled in both Draconian and English, which surprised her until she realized the trial automatically adapted to the challenger's language. The paradox went like this: a ruler must be strong to protect their people, but strength requires dominance. Dominance breeds resentment. Resentment leads to rebellion. Rebellion requires the ruler to be even stronger, continuing the cycle forever. How does a ruler break this pattern without losing power and letting their empire fall to external enemies? Philosophers had debated this for centuries. Some argued the answer was perfect justice. Others said overwhelming military might. A few suggested eliminating free will entirely through genetic or technological control. Every answer had problems, contradictions that led back to the original paradox. Maya read it twice, feeling the weight of 50,000 eyes on her. She thought about her grandmother, about the stories of standing up to bullies in that small Colorado town. She thought about the servants and soldiers she'd befriended, people with dreams and families and hopes that went far beyond serving the empire. "The paradox assumes the wrong starting point," Maya said clearly, her voice amplified across the arena. "It asks how a ruler maintains power. That's the wrong question." She turned to face the noble boxes, meeting Theron's gaze directly. "The question should be, why does a ruler need power in the first place? If it's for personal glory, then yes, you're trapped in an endless cycle of domination and resentment. But if power is a tool for serving others, for building something bigger than yourself, then the paradox disappears." Maya gestured to the crowd, to the common citizens in the cheaper seats. "A ruler who serves their people doesn't need to dominate them. When people see their leader working for their benefit, resentment turns to cooperation. When cooperation makes everyone stronger, rebellion becomes pointless. When the society is genuinely better than its neighbors, external enemies either join you or copy your methods." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The paradox only exists when you believe ruling means standing above people. It vanishes when you realize ruling means standing beside them." The silence that followed was profound. Maya had just challenged thousands of years of draconian political philosophy with a simple idea her grandmother could have explained over breakfast. In the noble boxes, some lords looked offended. Others looked thoughtful. In the common seats, workers and soldiers nodded slowly, recognizing truth when they heard it. An ancient priest, whose role was to judge the wisdom challenges, stepped forward. His voice was gravelly with age. "In 300 years of judging this trial, I have heard brilliant arguments, complex theories, mathematical proofs. Never have I heard someone dissolve the paradox by questioning its foundation." He bowed slightly. "The challenge is past." Theron stood abruptly, his composure cracking. "This is absurd. She's twisting ancient wisdom with primitive human nonsense." "Careful, Chancellor," the priest said quietly. "You're criticizing a challenger who has passed 2 trials. That itself borders on violating sacred law." Maya felt a surge of hope. 2 down, 1 to go. But she knew the final challenge would be the hardest. The trial of heart was designed to be impossible, testing whether a challenger valued the empire more than their own life. The arena floor opened, revealing a pit of actual fire below. Not holographic, not simulated. Real flames that burned hot enough to melt steel, fed by gases pumped from deep beneath the palace. The heat washed over Maya in waves, making her step back instinctively. A narrow bridge extended across the pit, barely 2 feet wide. At the far end sat an ancient draconian artifact, a crystal sphere that legend said contained the wisdom of the first emperor. The challenge was simple: cross the bridge, retrieve the artifact, and return. The bridge was designed for draconian claws and balance, nearly impossible for human feet. The heat alone would cause serious burns before reaching halfway. "The trial of heart demands sacrifice," Theron said, confidence returning to his voice. You must prove the Empire matters more than your survival. Retrieve the artifact or admit defeat. Maya stared at the flames, feeling her skin prickle from the heat even at this distance. This was designed to kill her. Even if she somehow kept her balance, the heat exposure would cause fatal injuries. Theron had won. Then an idea struck her, so obvious she almost laughed. Theron expected her to attempt the bridge like a draconian would, alone and relying on individual strength. But humans didn't work that way. Humans built tools, teams, systems. Humans were dangerous because they cooperated. I invoke ancient law, Maya called out. The trial of heart tests whether I value the Empire above myself. But the Empire isn't the nobles or the Emperor or even that artifact. The Empire is its people. So let me prove my heart by trusting them. She turned to face the crowd. I need rope, cooling equipment, and volunteers. Anyone willing to help me? For a moment nothing happened. Then Kyle Mitchell stood in the guard section. I'm in. A technician Maya had played cards with raised her hand. Then a cook. A maintenance worker. A junior officer. A merchant from the lower cities. Within minutes, dozens of people were volunteering, bringing equipment, offering suggestions. Theron shouted objections, but the ancient priest raised his hand. The law states the challenger must retrieve the artifact. It says nothing about methods. If she can inspire the people to help her, that itself proves heart. Working together they built a solution. Technicians rigged cooling systems to create a corridor of bearable temperature across the bridge. Engineers anchored safety lines. Kyle and his soldiers formed a human chain, ready to catch Maya if she fell. Someone produced heat-resistant gloves and boots, cobbled together from maintenance equipment. Maya approached the bridge again, this time surrounded by people who believed in her. She wasn't alone. That was the point. She crossed slowly, carefully, the heat still intense but survivable thanks to the cooling system. Behind her, workers adjusted equipment, called out warnings about weak points in the bridge, encouraged her forward. When she reached the artifact, she lifted it carefully and turned back. The return trip felt easier. Halfway across, she looked up at the noble boxes and saw something she hadn't expected. Some of the lords were standing, watching not with anger but with something like respect. They'd seen what true leadership looked like, and it wasn't about dominating from a throne. Maya reached solid ground and held up the artifact. The crowd erupted in genuine cheers, not the polite applause of court politics but real celebration. She'd passed all 3 trials and she'd done it by being completely, defiantly human. Theron's face was pale with fury, but he was trapped by his own challenge. Maya had won. Maya stood in the center of the arena, holding the ancient artifact, surrounded by the people who'd helped her survive. The cheers from the crowd washed over her in waves, and for the first time since being captured and enslaved, she felt something close to hope. But the trial wasn't over yet. Passing the 3 challenges only earned her the right to make her accusations public. Theron knew this. His political survival depended on discrediting her quickly, before the moment's momentum could build into something he couldn't control. He stood in the noble box, raising his hands for silence. The human has shown cleverness, I'll grant that. But cleverness isn't wisdom. She's passed trials designed for draconian culture by breaking every tradition, by making a mockery of sacred rites. Is this truly what we want our empire to become? Chaos disguised as innovation? Some nobles nodded agreement. Others remained silent, watching to see which way the political winds would blow. Maya recognized the tactic. Theron was trying to frame this as tradition versus chaos, hoping fear of change would override what people had just witnessed. But Maya had learned something important during her months in the palace. The nobles might have wealth and titles, but they were vastly outnumbered by everyone else. The workers, soldiers, merchants, technicians, and common citizens had been ignored for so long that nobody in power even considered them a political force. Until now. You're right about one thing, Chancellor, Maya said, her voice carrying across the arena. I did break traditions. I worked with others instead of standing alone. I used practical solutions instead of ancient rituals. I treated people as equals instead of servants. She paused. And those broken traditions? They're exactly what's killing this empire. She turned slowly, addressing the entire crowd rather than just the nobles. For 60 years, Emperor Valthor has watched this empire stagnate. Your military conquers new territories but can't hold them because you treat conquered people like property instead of citizens. Your economy struggles because nobles hoard wealth while workers can barely feed their families. Your technology hasn't advanced in centuries because anyone with new ideas is told that's not how we've always done things. Maya pointed at Theron. And while you've been stuck in the past, people like the Chancellor have been stealing from you. I have evidence, documentation that your technicians helped me gather. Theron has embezzled enough resources to feed 3-star systems for a decade. He's diverted military supplies and sold them to your enemies. He's bribed arena masters, poisoned ceremonial fires, and positioned assassins throughout this palace. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Theron's face went from pale to red. Lies. She has no proof, just the desperate accusations of a slave trying to project the files, Maya said calmly into her communication device. The arena's holographic displays lit up with documents, transaction records, intercepted communications. The technicians Maya had befriended had been busy for weeks, quietly gathering evidence, tracking money flows, documenting every illegal deal. It was all there, undeniable and detailed. Several noble houses who'd been unaware of the extent of Theron's corruption looked genuinely shocked. A few who'd been complicit tried to slip out of the arena, only to find Kyle's soldiers blocking the exits. This had been carefully planned. Theron lunged forward, reaching for some kind of weapon, but Valthor moved faster despite his age. The Emperor's massive form blocked the Chancellor's path, golden eyes burning with centuries of controlled rage. You forced me to marry a human, thinking it would weaken me? Valthor's voice rumbled across the arena. You couldn't have known she was the granddaughter of the woman who saved my life 60 years ago. You didn't bother researching because you assumed all humans were beneath notice. That arrogance is exactly what I've been trying to fix in this empire. The Emperor addressed the crowd directly. I have ruled for 4 centuries. I've expanded our territory, maintained our military, preserved our traditions. But preservation became stagnation. I've watched younger species surpass us in innovation, adaptability, and growth. The humans especially, despite being primitive by our standards just a century ago, advance faster than any civilization in recorded history. Do you know why? Valthor gestured to Maya and the volunteers still gathered around her. Because they cooperate. They value new ideas over old hierarchies. They measure success by solving problems, not by maintaining power structures. Maya passed the trials not by being strong alone, but by being strong together with others. That's not weakness. That's the future. The silence in the arena was heavy with tension. This was the moment where everything could go right or catastrophically wrong. The noble houses held military resources. If enough of them united against this change, civil war was inevitable. Then Admiral Jessica Chin, commander of the 3rd Fleet and one of the few high-ranking humans in the military, stood in the officers' section. The military stands with Emperor Valthor. We've seen what happens when competence is valued over birth rank. We've watched Maya's strategies save lives in border conflicts. If this is the direction the Empire is heading, the fleets will follow. One by one, other voices joined. A merchant guild representative talking about improved trade. A colonial governor describing better administration. Workers from the lower cities speaking about fair wages and safety reforms that Maya had quietly helped implement. Not everyone was convinced. Some noble houses stormed out, making their opposition clear. But they were the minority and they left alone, their allies abandoning them as the political reality became obvious. Change was coming whether they liked it or not. Theron was arrested, along with a dozen co-conspirators. The evidence was too overwhelming to dispute. He'd gambled everything on Maya failing the trials and he'd lost. In the days that followed, Maya and Valthor began the real work. Military reforms that promoted based on skill rather than species or birth. Economic policies that distributed wealth more fairly. Educational initiatives that encouraged innovation. Integration programs that treated conquered territories as partners rather than property. It wasn't easy. Centuries of tradition didn't disappear overnight. There were protests, assassination attempts, political battles that made the arena trial look simple. But slowly, steadily the empire began to change. Maya never forgot she'd started as a slave scrubbing floors. That perspective kept her grounded when nobles tried to flatter her, reminded her who she was really working for when policies got complicated. She walked through the palace greeting servants by name, ate in the common cafeteria with soldiers and technicians, listened to complaints from people who'd never had anyone in power actually care about their problems. 5 years after that day in the arena, the empire had integrated 20 human colonies as equal partners rather than conquered territories. Joint research centers were producing technological advances that benefited everyone. Species that had been enemies for centuries were finding common ground through human mediation techniques. Valthor and Maya stood in the palace gardens one evening, looking out at the capital city below. Lights from 1,000 cultures twinkled in the darkness, Proof that diversity could be strength rather than weakness. Your grandmother would be proud, Valthor said quietly. Maya touched the silver necklace at her throat, the quantum beacon that had connected her to this unlikely destiny. She always said the best way to change the world was to start by treating one person with kindness. You just have to do it over and over until it becomes normal. Simple wisdom. The best kind usually is. In the Imperial Museum, Rebecca Rodriguez's necklace had been placed on display, along with the story of a woman from Colorado who'd saved a dying alien and unknowingly changed the fate of 300 star systems. Visitors came from across the Empire to see it, proof that small acts of compassion could echo across the stars. Maya Rodriguez, former slave and current Imperial advisor, had helped reshape an empire by doing something revolutionary. She treated everyone like they mattered. Sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't strength or strategy or tradition. Sometimes it was simply remembering to be human.